All right, you should be all set.
Okay. Good evening. This is the January 4th meeting of the Economic and Community Development Committee. This is our first committee meeting of the year. Just quickly going to do a roll call. And I see we have Jim Freyer, Barbara Smith, Lisa Shanahan, Heather Dunn, and Jalen Seed. I know that Darlene Young should be on in a second. Also in attendance, just for purposes of the minutes, council members Dewan Wiggins, Nora Najelski Eichner, and Johan Lopez. So with that, call to order, we've done roll call. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak tonight?
There's no one in the attendees list, Josh.
Okay. And Darlene's still not on. I don't know what the story is there. Because I was going to kick it to the minutes, but why don't I do? All right, I think that's
I
Jalen.
just saw another. Oh, there it is. Okay, never mind.
Yeah, I thought that was going to be Darlene popping on. Before I asked about the minutes, just a little housekeeping before we get going. I know that last meeting I told you there were going to be updates from the remaining departments, including TMP and Building Code Enforcement. You're going to be hearing those updates next month in February. Tonight, as you saw, with the agenda has been a little condensed, and we're really focusing on South Norwalk and the MLK Corridor Initiative and the South Norwalk Community Plan. I don't know where Darlene is, so I'm gonna just move forward. Does anyone kind of have a motion on the minutes?
So moved.
Jalen, any corrections, deletions, amendments? I realize they're very long, so there's Darlene.
Well, somebody made a lot of corrections because the first one that went out was a lot of typos.
Sorry. Anything from anybody?
Nope.
Nope. All right, then all in favor? Opposed? Well, are abstentions? Darlene, did you vote?
You're voting on the minutes?
Yeah. All right. Okay. So moved. All right. So obviously the first thing on our agenda is regarding an update on the South Norwalk Community Plan. Sorry, I have the wrong agenda in front of me. South Norwalk Investment MLK Corridor Initiative. Jess Vanashek's going to do the presentation tonight. So Jess, the floor is yours.
Great. Good evening. Just to start, I have the pleasure of being able to talk about the South Norwalk investments that the city of Norwalk has made and also the MLK Corridor Initiative. But really without the work of all of the council members and without the work of the redevelopment agency and without the work of District B and also the MLK Corridor Initiative members, we wouldn't have been able to see all of this progress. So, I'm just going to put it out there. I ended up taking a 40-page PowerPoint presentation and condensing it down to about 8 pages. So we're going to run through it really quickly, but just know that the work that's been going on over the last number of years could extend, probably meetings and looking at Darlene through this Zoom kind of virtual portal in thinking of how many hours we've all spent together talking about the work that has been done. So I have a presentation and I'm going to kick off that presentation, and Darlene and Brian and whoever else is on the call, more than welcome to weigh in at any point in time and kind of highlight some things if you want to. But definitely, again, although I have the pleasure of talking about the South Norwalk investments and talking about MLK Corridor, it definitely is the work of the work of many to be able to get to this point. So let me just share my screen and open up the PowerPoint that I have for you. Which again is not 40 slides. It's only about 8. It's only about 8 slides. So we'll go from there, but let's just start here. So we're going to talk a little bit about background in the MLK Corridor Initiative, just to be able to make sure everybody knows the effort that has gone on. And then we're going to dive a little bit further into the investments that the city has made. And I don't know why my screen is doing that. It's very bizarre. And then talk about the total investments. So just, wow, this is really, is this growing for everybody or is it just me?
No, it's growing.
No, it's for
growing.
everybody.
Wow.
Growing and growing and growing.
Don't you love my fancy effects that I don't know how I'm doing it? Oh my goodness. I love Zoom.
I think you're in like a cinematic mode.
You know, all right, let me just, can you guys see this slide here?
Yeah.
Okay, because it seems to be kind of staying the same, right? If I keep it here. Sabrina, are you on your computer?
Yeah, I am.
Can
Do you
I
wanna-
send, can
Yeah,
I
do you
send,
want to email it to me?
yeah, Josh, do you mind if I email this to Sabrina so that you guys don't need to look at the thing flashing?
No,
Or are
go
you,
for it.
or are
of
you
course.
okay with this version? Are you okay looking at it like this?
I don't care. I mean, for whatever, if everyone can
Fine.
read it, that's my only thing. And unless anyone feels that they can't review the materials, then, then email it. But if everyone can, then why don't we just proceed?
Okay, perfect. So during the 2017 legislative session, we had a group come in, the Freedom Faith Collaborative, and talk to the city of Norwalk about work that they had been doing, not only with, okay. I'm sorry, guys. I'm just going to stop this and send this over to Sabrina. Is that okay with everybody? I'm so sorry. There's always someone in the hot seat. I hate when
I
it's
know.
me in the hot seat. Let me just switch this over to Sabrina. Thank you in advance, Sabrina, for doing this.
Yep. Just let me know when you send it.
Anyone got a joke?
Not a clean one.
It's usually you with the joke.
I'm sorry.
We are live here, Josh.
I'm sorry.
Yes, and you're the jokester, Josh. You always
Yes,
have
he is.
so.
We know you got one.
He's dying
Not
to
what-
say it.
He's
Not
dying
what
to
I'm-
tell. Yeah,
Not
just
what
say
I'm
it.
saying publicly.
Don't do it.
Okay.
That one
See,
needs
okay.
a chair.
You're right.
Well, Jess, I don't know if there's any background maybe you can shed while those slides are waiting to go up or.
I'm actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to save it as a PDF on my just going to save it. I'm sorry, guys. Such a pain. During the legislative session in 2017, we started working with a group to be able to talk about the MLK Corridor Initiative. And basically what had happened was that the group had gone into the Department of Revenue at the state, and they were encouraged to think about, they were encouraging the state to be able to think about writing legislation that recognized MLK corridors across the state, and to create a program that basically allowed a highlight to happen on MLK corridor initiatives across the state. And so when the legislation was written, then there were different organizations that applied to the state, the Department of Revenue, in order to be able to seek funding to be able to start this MLK corridor initiative. And the group that we started working with created started this MLK Corridor initiative, not only in the city of Norwalk, but also Middleton and New Britain. And, you know, that's a long story in its own right, but suffice to say that we had about 23 people in South Norwalk that came together under the leadership of Reverend Clark and also the mayor, who were the chairs of the corridor initiative. And we brought together these 23 people for the last number of years in order to be able to identify the priorities for South Norwalk and how we want to move forward as a community. And we did a number of different planning exercises, and one of them was actually designating the geography itself. And the South Norwalk geography was designated with this group of 23 people in order to be able to notify the state that we had designated the MLK Corridor Initiative and that we were involved in the program. And from there, we worked with the community to be able to identify a set of priorities. And the priority list ended up being almost $7.6 million worth of initiatives just for South Norwalk alone that the community had identified. And they were under different criteria or different themes. One of them was environmental and green space, one was housing, another one was education, and we were thinking about safety and neighborhood beautification as well. And the interesting thing that ended up happening was that we worked with the state and we worked with Senator Duff to be able to have the state understand that we were going through this exercise where we were bringing the community together. We were talking about priorities. We knew that there was $7.6 million worth of initiatives that we wanted to address, and yet we had no ability at the local level to be able to fund that heavy of a lift. And so when it ended up coming down to it, we worked with Senator Duff to be able to get a grant through DCD for $3 million. And we were so excited about it because this was something that really allowed us to think about how to put pen to paper, so to say, in the sense of thinking about the actual work in which we were doing with the MLK Corridor. Yay! Yay! All right. Oh. Okay, Sabrina, I think you want to switch to slide 4, please. So,
Jess, we
Uh-oh.
didn't hear a word you
Lost
said. It's
her.
either you or the screen. This is perfect. I don't feel so bad.
Oh, Jess, you muted
You're
yourself.
mute now.
there is something that is
There you
going
are.
on. It is just not okay here. Oh, you guys,
It's okay.
you for your patience. I'm telling you. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. If this isn't the choppiest presentation of all time of your 2024, let's just kick it off and get it out of the way. Oh my goodness. All right. So this is the geography. This is the MLK geography that the MLK Corridor Initiative brought together to be able to recognize. And this is where we acknowledge that the $7.6 million worth of work needed to happen. Bob Duff came in and was able to work with us in DCD to award us $3 million, which we then went through the list and prioritized those $7.6 million of items and addressed them. But what was great about the work that we were doing was that we came up with this list to the extent that we then were able to talk to different departments about what the community wanted in South Norwalk. So we were able to talk to DPW, we were able to talk to Parks and Rec, we could talk to community services. And of all of the things that were on the list of 7.6 million, we were actually able to address them through either local operating or capital or through the MLK Corridor Initiative. We also, of course, had funding for GGP from the Sono collection. And in addition to that, we also were able to then formulate state grants and local grants in order to be able to ask for funding to support the work. And so what I'm going to show you over the next couple of slides is all of the work that has been done since the MLK Corridor Initiative has kicked off, and we've identified those $7.6 million worth of priorities. So go ahead, Sabrina. So one of the goals that we identified was environmental investments. And of course, this not only was focused on increasing residents' health, but also supporting long-term environmental health, dealing with climate change, thinking about flood resistance and resiliency and sustainability in the area, increasing quality of life. And we know that as we plant street trees, we reduce traffic, and we can increase property values. And so, the investment that has been made since 2017 in South Norwalk community in that MLK geography, that yellow geography that I just showed you, is actually $24.7 million specific to South Norwalk. And the $26.6 million is what's included in South Norwalk, in addition to some other citywide initiatives, like, for example, the Climate Action Plan Initiative or the Tree Canopy Initiative, which are really citywide plans, but they have huge benefit for the community themselves. And I'm not going to read through each of the slides, but I wanted to highlight some of the work that's been going on as that makes up this 24.7 million. So it's tree planting, it's some fence replacements. Through the help of the redevelopment agency, we were able to get almost just over $6 million, $6.8 million for brownfield remediation. We also received $6 million for the Harbor Valley Trail. In addition to also thinking about that tree canopy that really helps us guide where we know heat islands are and where we want to be able to focus little urban forests and also do tree planting along the street. When I talked to Paul Sotnick earlier, he had said that just even in the last 2 planting seasons, and Lisa, you'll know this, we planted over 134 trees in South Norwalk alone in just that yellow geography. So not only were we able to use the MLK money that was put aside for tree planting, but in addition to that, we also put aside almost $1 million of ARPA money as well. That was citywide tree planting money. And so we've been able to not only use that 300,000, but also a portion of the $1 million as well. Next slide, Sabrina. Now, from a business support standpoint, Sabrina's really done amazing work to be able to build up the supports that we offer to not only South Norwalk, but the city as a whole. And the South Norwalk commitments alone are around $400,000. And of course, the goal here is to really support businesses that employ residents here in the city of Norwalk, that provide training, that provide education, professional development. They provide quality services and products to the community. And also we've worked with them to be able to create attractive and welcoming storefronts. And so whether it be through a storefront improvement program, which is an 80-20 match that the city offers, the COVID business assistance grants, the development center, or even the websites that have been created, either Visit Norwalk or Business for Norwalk, and also the special events. They're all targeted specifically to help small business. And, of all the funding that we've given citywide, including the $396,000 in South Norwalk, over 75% of it has been geared to and directed to women and minority owned businesses. So, we ended up doing a criteria where at least 1/3 of all of the money that we would give for businesses would be geared to women and minority owned business owners. But in reality, over 75% of the money that we've given out are specifically to women and minority owned businesses. So we're really pleased with that. We're super happy with the diversity of the businesses that have come through, whether they be boutique ice cream shops, or whether they're, existing sign shops or existing hair salons or barbers. And so they're all, it's a huge diverse set of businesses that we're really pleased with. The other thing that I wanted to mention on this slide is that, we worked really closely with community services, because community services offered 2 phases of programs where they were able to give COVID assistance money. And the first phase happened about a year and a half ago or a year ago, where the city gave $2 million to nonprofit organizations. And the second phase of that funding will happen this calendar year in 2024, where another round of funding will come out from community services. And the reason I say that is because we worked really closely with Lamont Daniels' team to be able to understand sort of that how to use the ARPA funds and the different pots of money in ways that we could get the highest return. And by highest return, I mean offer the community the highest amount that we could, the highest degree of funding that we could, and try to spread it as equitably as we possibly could. And so the business supports, this is specific to, the numbers you see here are specific to South Norwalk, except for the Business Development Center. The money that came out of these programs is higher for this city, you know, if you were to look at the city as a whole, but they're for-profit businesses only. And I wanted to highlight this because Lamont's team worked specifically with not-for-profit or 501c3 organizations. And we did that specifically so that the different funding pots would be able to focus on the different streams of organizations that are out there. So from a roadway safety improvement standpoint, and you're going to hear from Jim Travers and Garrett Balilla next month, not only on the TMP updates, but also Complete Street update as well. But, you know, we've really focused on, and we have been focusing citywide on pedestrian safety and being able to have an equitable approach to using the roadways across the city. And in South Norwalk, this is super important. We have the first last mile, thinking about work, thinking about schools and amenities. We talked a lot with the community about access to grocery stores and doctors' offices. We also talked a lot about just being able to have sidewalks that are consistent through the neighborhood. And I think that resonates even more so now with the South Norwalk School coming in, thinking about the different pathways that people will be taking and the connectivity between their homes and the school itself. And so for this particular category, we spent 15.48 or committed $15.48 million to South Norwalk, specific to that MLK geography that is highlighted in yellow. And that includes sidewalk installation and repair, the rebuilding of the MLK staircase. We will be putting in 4 new bus shelters. I'm not sure if everybody knows, but the Norwalk Transit District, for the first time in 30 years, is doing a comprehensive operation analysis, which is actually a rerouting all of their bus routes based on new development and where pockets of employment are and so on and so forth, which is so important. We've been focusing, as you know, on bike lanes and infrastructure. Year over year, we've more than doubled our sidewalk installations and our bike lane installations, not just in South Norwalk, but across the city as a whole. And also thanks to the redevelopment agency, we've been able to secure $14 million in funding, not only for the South Norwalk train station, but also for the Webster Street lot, and creating that connectivity. And, you know, I don't want to steal Jim's thunder for next month when he talks about it, but you know, one of the things that we're working with Brian on super closely now with the RDA is being able to think about the stretch of MLK between between Washington and Low, and thinking about how wide that road is and thinking about how to reconfigure that road. And all of this will be happening with the community, but all of this has been spurred from that conversation that we've been having with the community about the traffic being too quick, or, you know, the medians on MLK not necessarily having the gardening or the landscaping that maybe some of the other medians have seen when we redid Sono Collection, for example, further up on West Avenue. So, you know, this in particular was a huge topic, and it really focused on not only, I would say, the neighborhood streets of sidewalks and connectivity, and making sure pedestrians have a safe route to school and have a safe route to be able to get where they need to go. But in addition to that, also thinking about West Avenue and how busy that road is, and how traditional crosswalks may not be as effective in such a busy area. We worked really closely with Grace Baptist Church and other folks to be able to understand some of the accidents and some of the pedestrians that have actually been hit on West Avenue and why that's happening. And so there is quite a bit of funding as well, $310,000 that will go specifically to crosswalks in and along West Avenue and also around that MLK Washington intersection. So, you know, in full disclosure, I feel kind of silly even touching on this particular slide, because this really is not my wheelhouse. And this is probably the biggest, this is the biggest bang of this whole entire presentation. And as everybody knows on this, you know, on the Zoom, there's just been so much work by everybody on this call, by the council, the previous council, by the community, by, you know, the Board of Education, Alan Lowe is his team, the mayor's office, Senator Duff, and you know, everybody that we work with so closely to be able to ensure that the community has, you know, an opportunity for educational advancement within the community itself, you know, and the community has the resources to be able to, and access to those resources in a really meaningful way. And so, of course, you know, between the South Norwalk School and the Safe Routes to School work that we're going to be doing with the 1.5 million to build sidewalks, thinking about the drainage and the flooding mitigation that needs to go on in the area related to the school being built there, and just the work that needs to go into that. And so that total is 138.2 million. And, you know, again, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on this particular slide, but, you know, the investment that has gone in, and really it's hard to say that any one of these things is related to the MLK Corridor Initiative, because the school has been talked about probably for decades, I would imagine. You know, Darlene, I see you nodding, but it's so exciting to be able to kind of build a deck like this that starts to put together all of these investments, and to see how they're all working together in order to be able to create such a stronger community or stronger neighborhood based on some of the conversations that we've been able to have. Next slide, please. So from a housing standpoint, you know, this was a really interesting one and I feel like we made a lot of ground with the MLK Corridor Initiative here. And partly that's because some of the existing grants that we had in place that had focused on housing and home improvements were specific to historical structures, or were specific to property owners, not necessarily renters. And so, you know, we were able to work through the community effort to be able to say, it doesn't really feel right? It needs to be renters and owners. It needs to be historical homes and non-historical homes. And we need to be able to figure out how to make a more equitable approach to being able to make investments and help people make investments into their home. And so, you know, we've seen a lot of this work. We've seen a lot of this work through some of the beautification work and some of the neighborhood improvement work that we've been doing. But this has really been led by the redevelopment agency, where we've been able to do the first phase of helping do facade improvements to residential homes. We did 13 of them for $250,000. And now there's another $750,000 for a second phase of facade improvement program. The $500,000 that you see here is really exciting. It's a low interest loans for homeowners that may need to replace their boiler, replace windows, or replace roofs. Those big investments that may be more emergency based and more seasonal based. And we've been prioritizing who we've been helping first and foremost based on winter coming along and trying to be able to push through some of those projects. So just a snapshot of some of the work that we're doing on housing. Sabrina, did we hit a neighborhood improvement slide? Is there a neighborhood improvement slide in there?
I don't think so. I didn't see one when I opened it either. Let me see. Yeah, no, I don't have one.
So the other thing that we were working on is these neighborhood improvement, and part of that is thinking about blight violations and zoning violations, and how to be able to support not only South Norwalk, but how to be able to support the neighborhoods as a whole, and being able to understand how blight works and how zoning violations work, but also understanding what resources are available at City Hall. And as you know, in November, we announced the neighborhood improvement team, where we're bringing on a new neighborhood improvement manager, and that person is going to be tasked to being able to go out to district meetings and community meetings in order to be able to create a conduit between the communities and also City Hall. But the work that we've done with the MLK Corridor has been really focused in the sense of being able to introduce murals and introduce banners, introduce new garbage cans, introduce cameras in areas of high dumping, or additional lighting in areas of high dumping. We've been working closely with property owners to be able to install those cameras and lights, and we've been working with Eversource as well to be able to do that. Sabrina's been leading a number of different mural installations. We were able to install 2 murals in the corridor for $50,000. We're going to be installing a mural on the Monroe Underpass, and also thinking about doing, if you know, the big chain link fence on Ely Avenue that is between Ely Avenue and the Metro North train track. We're talking about doing a community mural installation along that fence to be able to create some, just to create an optical, you know, some aesthetics and some optics, instead of being able to look at the tracks with the garbage, and have that train sound reverberate from those residential and commercial buildings. So, you know, all in all, it's a great story. We've committed $179 million. If you actually look at all of the slides that I gave, and I will email them out to this group after this presentation. But if we look at all of the funding that has been committed specifically to South Norwalk, it's $179 million. And, you know, when we look at it, we can say, okay, you know, Meadow Gardens with the Norwalk Housing Authority is 41 million, and the school is 70 million. And you know, there are a few big items in there. I think the school with all of the items that were listed on that slide is around 85 million. So there are some big items there, but when you think, and you know, when I look at some of the folks that we've been working with on the MLK Corridor Initiative, you know, 7.6 million seemed so out of, it just seems so out of reach. And I remember, you know, sitting at the table and we were all kind of looking at each other saying 7.6 million, like we have nothing to work, you know, we don't have a whole heck of a lot to work with. We have an operating budget and a capital budget. How are we going to do this? And so, you know, to be here like 48 months later, let's say, and having a number that we're looking at with 1.79 million, I think it just speaks to the work that the community has done over the last number of decades to be able to get here. But, you know, I'm really proud of the MLK Corridor Initiative and the work that we've done, even for, you know, what little percentage of that $179 million we've been able to kind of move the needle on and make movement on. So, you know, I'll leave the presentation there. I will make sure all the slides are attached, and I will send them out to this group so that you have them for reference and you have all the numbers that are included. And I think, you know, if anyone has questions about any of the specific projects that are highlighted in any of those slides, you know, it's, again, they're not all economic community development. They're public works projects, they're parks and rec projects, they're community services projects. So, you know, it really does take everybody in City Hall moving along with volunteers and moving along with everybody who's been helping to make all that happen. But if you have any questions about any of the project highlights or anything like that, I'm more than happy to direct you to whoever is leading those projects and be able to help you gain more information on them. But, you know, they're public projects that are funded through either local or state or federal programs, not to mention all of the work that we've been doing under environmental with all of the grants that we've been getting for flood mitigation and resiliency work along Water Street, and thinking about safe access and dry access. And so just a lot of really good work by all the city departments. And, you know, thanks for your patience with your 2024 choppy presentation. But you know, just really good story. And it's one of those examples that the number is large and representative of so much work, but I think the relationships that we have built with the community and the relationships that we've built with the people who are, you know, with everyone who's living in South Norwalk, the residents, that is really priceless to a large extent, right? And it just feels like we've really been able to build this communication and this conversation where if somebody needs something, then it's okay to just pick up the phone and have a conversation about it. And it's sort of like, wouldn't it be great to think of being able to think about all of the different neighborhoods in the city and thinking about kind of how to build a story like this.
Jim?
I think it's a spectacular story, Jess. It's very, very impressive presentation. If we were to take a look at the rest of the city, I guess maybe it's not fair to include the South Norwalk School in that, but how does this rate with some of the other maybe taxing districts as far as the investment that we're putting in there. Is this far and away the most money that we're spending in a particular area of the city, and by how much, for example? And I
Yeah.
don't mean to pin you down with specifics, but
Yeah,
Just
no,
curious.
no, of course. So if you think of the 179 and you take the school out, that's probably 80, that's probably 80 or 85, right? So then we're probably
Yeah.
looking around 95 million. And then your Meadow Gardens is probably 40 of that. So then you're looking around 50 million, right? Probably. So to a certain extent, I think the South Norwalk number is probably larger because we've been focused on it for 4 or 5 years trying to really draw in specific funding. But I also think that it relates to some of the unique characteristics of South Norwalk, with also the resiliency and the fact that it's coastal and the fact that it's seeing flooding challenges. I also think that because of the MLK corridor, we often see not a lot of street trees, and we were trying to do a lot of work along that corridor. And in addition to that, I think that South Norwalk is unique because of some of the land use decisions that have been made over the last, hundreds of years that basically have, have South Norwalk has some of those contractor yards, and we've been really trying to address some of that. So I do believe the funding, I can't tell you specifics, Jim. I do believe that the funding is more for South Norwalk because we've been specifically trying to think about how to address these unique characteristics in South Norwalk that maybe some of the other communities don't, or some of the other neighborhoods don't specifically see. But if we think about some of the projects that were presented last month to your committee, or even the work that we are going to see with Jim next month, each of the neighborhoods has seen such huge progression, I think, and such huge progress and evolution as far as the work that we've been doing, and I think that one of those examples is probably the sidewalks in Row 8 that we've been talking about for ages and ages and ages, right? Or the Merritt 7 train station being completely rebuilt, or the Norwalk River Valley Trail being, such a huge focus area for connectivity and mobility. I already mentioned that we've doubled sidewalk installations and bike lane installations, and also even the Wall Street neighborhood, that project with the reconstruction of Wall Street configuration between Belden and East Avenue is going to be almost a $30 million project when it's all said and done, between River, Brunel, and Main. So, I do think the South Norwalk focus has been heavy, because of those unique characteristics that I mentioned. But if we were to look at it from neighborhood to neighborhood, I think we're trying to make an equitable approach. I do think that the urban core is getting a lot, I think that the urban core, because of all of the characteristics in which that corridor has, I think is getting a lot more attention, in the sense of being able to think about what grants are available from a local level and a state level and a federal level. And a lot of them are so focused on infrastructure and focused on coastal resiliency and focused on transit-oriented development that, the work that we've been seeing, the work that we've been planning has been in order to be able to secure all of these state and federal funds to be able to supplement what we have at the local level for these projects. So, big long answer, but I think, although I don't think it'd be one-to-one comparable, I do think that we're making huge investments across the board.
I think also you might say that in all the other areas that you mentioned and all the examples that you cited, you're talking about a single thing that might be being planned. But I think that what we see in South Norwalk is more of a comprehensive plan, and it covers many, many different aspects of what's going to be beneficial to the whole community. So I think from that standpoint, it's probably a lot more complicated and a lot more difficult to achieve. And I'm not surprised that it's going to be, the leading money winner.
Yeah.
Or required money. So
Barbara?
I think great
Oh,
job.
sorry, Jen.
Yeah, just to add to some of your comments, Jim, and what you were saying, Jessica. I mean, I think the difference in the focus on improving South Norwalk from where we were I don't want to say 5 years, like 6 years ago, and in the past, the focus now is extraordinary. And I want to credit Jess, you and Brian, for your vision and your ability to, seek out those funds to bring into this community and to, just improve everything about it. Darlene, I know you've been fighting for this community for more years than anyone. And, I'm sure you can speak to this more so. But, just the investment, the respect for the community and improving it is, it's priceless. It's priceless. And so it's, I just wanted to make those comments because after years of just, neglect
Decades.
my word.
Decades.
Decades. Yeah, decades. Absolutely. Absolutely decades. So this focus is just crucial to the community. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. And so I just want to use, I think the tail end of what Jim said was a good segue to our next item.
If that's what you're going to do, I have a comment about this.
Oh,
So
sorry.
Yeah.
Hit it, Darlene.
So I appreciate all the work. I want to just give credit to some folks. So our former state rep, Bruce Morris, really kind of got Norwalk involved, and actually at the state level, got this initiative going. And so there are only 7 MLK corridors in the state, and Norwalk has the largest. And so therefore, we've put in a significant amount of money to get this work done. And in addition to all the things that you've mentioned, Jessica, I believe, is Brian on the line, and he might talk about it. You even got $1 million investment for Columbus Court, which is right in the, what was that called? The TOD corridor. And so that is a significant improvement for those residents. And some of the folks, we've been meeting since 2017, and they included quite a few clergy members. They included members from the NAACP, they included residents. And so we met on a consistent basis for a couple of years to get this work done. So it was no small feat. We're still got a lot of work to do, but I appreciate all the work that you all have done. And we've held more charrettes than normal, but we did what we needed to do to meet with folks in the community to get their input. And that is what is driving those things that you listed and we talked about. And there's a lot more work to be done. And Jim, as you mentioned, the amount of money that's going into this, South Norwalk has been divested from for quite some time. And there's a lot of things that had not gone on in South Norwalk. And that's just the truth of it. But we're at a point where we're making changes, and we need to make these changes for the folks who have lived here all their lives, and they need to, and I've often said this, Jess, you hear me say it you've heard me say it all the time. My belief is if we're making these changes now and everything that's happening in South Norwalk, the folks that have grown up here, still live here, raise their families here, want to stay here, they should be able to benefit from the changes that are happening now, not 10 years from now. And we need to be a priority. And that's what this MLK initiative has done. In my view, is there more to be done? Absolutely. We planted trees at a couple of the developments, the condo associations at Rudner Court. So we've done a lot of work. So I appreciate all the work that's going into it and all the work that needs to be done.
Well, we appreciate you and
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Your ability to move the needle on this stuff.
Appreciate that, Jess.
Yeah, big part of it. That's a perfect segue, I think.
I know. All right. So as everyone saw, the second item is obviously related to South Norwalk. This is for the RDA. Jess and Brian, I think you guys are going to do this together. So the floor is yours. Take it away. Oh, actually, let me read the item for the record before we do that, which is to transfer 150,000 of GGP funding from account number, as noted, to the redevelopment agency for the completion of the South Norwalk Community Plan. Now take it away.
I'll move that. I'll move it.
So moved by Barbara Smith, for the record.
All right, thank you. Just, would you like me to kick everything off?
Yeah, that'd be great.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. It's nice to see you all and Happy New Year. Just wanted to bring this forth. This is a project I know I've discussed with a number of you for quite some time. I'm really excited to be talking about it tonight at the stage that it's at. If you'll recall, as part of the South Norwalk train station work and all the work Jess has been talking about, when I came into this position, we went and took a look around the train station. We recognized there's a lot of things going on and that there should be some dedicated attention to a very specific geography in order to make sure that it gets done right. And that's exactly in the same theme for what I'm going to talk about tonight. And it's really building upon that work. It's tied to that work from a connectivity standpoint. But the specific geography we're referring to is the South Norwalk area. And we're calling it, by design, the sort of the South Norwalk Community Plan. As part of the TOD work that we talked about tonight, the MLK work that Jess has been talking about, we created a community advisory committee in addition to our technical advisory committee, where we kind of wanted to focus on, the real nitty gritty planning, technical things, transportation, but we wanted to have a concurrent focus on community need. And that's what's the most exciting part about what's being proposed for you tonight. And I'll go through the details of it, but at the highest level, it represents what I've been talking about for a couple of years now about how, our job is, of course, economic development. We want to try to raise, we want to try to generate property tax revenues. We want to look at development opportunities. But an integral and equally important role is community development. And what we heard about through our work doing the work around South Norwalk train station is there's community needs that need very specific and dedicated attention. And there's community concerns as well. Gentrification, displacement, what kind of policies can we do to help try to balance these very, complicated and technical things while we're trying to grow as a city. So what we tasked our consultant with, that's working on, the design of the South Norwalk train station area, is how do we best integrate these two areas around the train station, and also talking about the new school that's being constructed, looking south down South Main. How can we bring these together in a cohesive plan and cohesive vision that obviously has economic benefit, but addresses the equity concerns that we're hearing on a daily basis through every project in an earnest and really a collaborative way? So what was put before tonight is a request for $150,000, a utilization of the GGP funding, as noted in your agenda, to fund that study. That would be in addition to some money that we're coming to the table with for the redevelopment agency for some economic impact modeling, as well as some additional assessments of brownfields. But I'll talk a little bit more in detail about the task, and then I could open it up for a conversation and any feedback that you all have. In terms of the scope and the geography of the area that we're talking, the focus, we're kind of using the the school at the old Hatch and Bailey site that's going to be coming in as a center point, but also looking at Woodward, Meadow, Knapp Street, Lexington, Eli, and expanding from there. And there's going to be an opportunity as part of the planning process to finalize that study area. But that's kind of generally where we're thinking about this right now. And we'll be doing the typical planning functions as the first couple tasks. We're going to take a look at, existing conditions, take a look at existing plans, look at the infrastructure network, look at the land uses, look at, obviously there's been a number of planning exercises in the new zoning that have impacts since our TOD planning work. We'll be taking a look at working with the community to figure out, what, ultimately they want that area to look like down the road and how we could get to that point. But I think the centerpiece and the real interesting part of this study is we're trying to develop a list of improvements at the end of the day that will have the biggest impact for social equity. I think that is a thing that, since we're leading with that, is a first-rate approach that not a lot of communities in the nation are doing. So I commend the council leadership and everyone that came to the table with this request, because this isn't just coming from me. This is coming from the community. It's coming from leadership. It's coming from a lot of different sources. And I'm just grateful that we have an opportunity to actually try to hit it head on, to look at not only, okay, yes, we want roads, yes, we want infrastructure. This is all important things, but there's maybe some policies that we need to look at, some discussion around, anti-displacement measures, and then looking at those policies, but also figuring out the economic impact of those policies. So as part of this scope and the work that we're funding is to not only identify these policies, but to take a look at the economic impact of those proposed solutions through an actual firm of economists, and really giving us some tangible results that we could talk about to fund these projects. Because, all the great work Jess is doing with MLK and you all are doing, all that money, it's state, it's federal money. How can we create a sustainable funding source for these sort of projects is something that we're going to be looking at. So I know that's probably quite a lot. That's the highest level that I could kind of give of the study. But it's something I'm excited about and happy to answer any questions that you may have.
I'll just start. Let's get a sense of, the timeline. Is there an RFP that needs to come out for a consultant? I don't know. I think maybe a little more specifically on what the actual money is going towards. I mean, I realize there are community needs and a community study, but and also I think specifically, I know it says GGP funding, but from which part of the GGP funding it's actually coming from.
And I can defer to Jess. I believe it was GGP contingency, Jess. Is that where the specific funding source? And in terms of procurement, we are looking at this as a change order to the existing design work that we're doing currently. It's an expansion of that work, and it only makes logical sense to have that consultant work on them, so that we're going to be ahead of, and I know there's interest in advancing this sooner rather than later. So we're going to be, ready to hit the ground hopefully at the end of this month, start next month, and then probably about a 9 to 12 month planning process.
Other questions? Jim.
Brian, is this going, if I understand you right, you're talking about the new South Norwalk School being more or less the centerpiece of this, and working a way out and from there. Does, it seems like that's a challenge, or even without doing any kind of study. I mean, you've got a lot of heavy industrial properties down there. Wouldn't that be really expensive to try to start to relocate those or move those around? Or would the expectation be that we could work around them? Or I'm just quite, it's just maybe just a big challenge, and I don't have the wherewithal to understand what the consultants would come up with in that. It just seems like an onerous task.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's complex, obviously, and I think you obviously have the industrial zone study that has recently been done, so there's a little bit of a jump start there in terms of identification and things of that nature. But to your point, yeah, we're basically going to look at it at a relatively higher level. I mean, I think we'll be able to answer those questions as part of this study, but I don't have that answer obviously for you tonight because it's complex, and I think this is us trying to hit it head on and see what we could figure out, not just with a planning firm to kind of talk about it, but with the economic impact analysis that we plan to do.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that usually a lot of consultants come in and pretty much got to justify what your thinking is, and then give you substantiate it. But this is more just really problem solving at the very basic level.
Yeah, exactly. It's just try to provide a more localized focus, and there's been a lot of talk more. It's not necessarily on the individual land uses, I think is what you're referring to, but more about generalized policies to sort of combat gentrification, or look at anti-displacement. What does that mean if you're going to adopt that sort of policy from an economic perspective? So I think the land uses are an underlying feature of it, an underlying component that we're going to examine, but that's not. It's more of a policy-driven approach.
Yeah, exactly.
And Brian, I think it's specific to it's so specific to the geography too. So Brian was mentioning some of the conversations about housing. Obviously, the affordable housing plan is underway with the AKRF currently, and we expect to receive some housing gap assessments for both market rate and affordable closer to the end of this month, probably in mid-February. And that will lead us into some work that we're doing with the Urban Land Institute in March, thinking about housing policy and thinking about housing in general for the city of Norwalk. But, all of these, and those are things that weren't even actually in the presentation that we had just talked about, but these are all things that are happening, and the work that Brian will be leading as part of the RDA. All of that knowledge will be able to be taken from some of the other studies and feed into this. So not the zoning, the industrial study work, and also these housing assessment gaps, and thinking about addressing any gentrification that may be happening. And, Jim, to your question about the contractor yards, we've worked so closely with the community, with not being able to get exactly what everybody wants with the industrial zone study or even the rezoning, right? And so, it's such a challenge in thinking about even rezoning those parcels and knowing that those uses are still kind of grandfathered in for as long as they are on that particular parcel. And so, you know, Brian's right in thinking about the bigger, broader sort of 30,000 foot level, or 10,000 foot level. But then I think what you're talking about specifically is what we need to be working with District B and some of the MLK corridor folks and some of that funding, and making sure that that folks have the ability to be safe in the community, that there are sidewalks, that we're able to do as much as we can to partner with those contractor yards. And part of that neighborhood improvement team, part of their responsibility will be going out and working with contractor yards to be able to think about ways in which we can start to do some work on their properties, whether it be buffers or whether, you know, what that exactly looks like, to be able to try to make a better transition or cohesion in the neighborhood between those uses. But that's not, I say that knowing full well that that's not the final answer on this, but just trying to offer sort of just the short-term thinking about how to think about these things, knowing that, you know, I know not everybody is happy with what that looks like currently.
Darlene?
I'm very
sorry,
anxious
Jen.
to see what they come up with. So I'm fascinated by this.
Darlene?
Yeah, Brian triggered something in me about the map that you showed earlier, Jess. Did that include Boughton Street?
Mhm.
It did. Okay,
So
that's all.
do you remember it? Do you remember, because we did the investment on Boughton, the playground?
Yeah,
So it
yeah.
actually runs, the geography runs along Boughton, but we had said that when the geography runs along, that includes the left side of the street and the right side, or the east or
Right,
west or north or
right.
south, whatever it is. So,
Okay.
but even to a certain extent, you know, even when we've had homes that have come in for home improvements, or we've had, you know, a fence that's falling down or something that needs addressed, even if it's, you know, even if it's a couple houses away from from where that MLK geography is, or half a block or whatever it is, I think we've looked at it and we've kind of assessed with the MLK corridor initiative folks if we should be making that investment and thinking about it. Because of course, you know, we had to draw geography, but to a certain extent, you know, do you want to say no to somebody that can be helped, or, you know, a fence that could be fixed if it's 300 feet or 20 feet off of the line, which I don't think, you know, so we've been using discretion in that.
And so, and then, so what, Brian, you're talking about, you mentioned Lexington, Ely. I guess that's too, like, is Boughton Street included? I just want to make sure Boughton Street is going through a lot of changes, and it's tight, and it's really a disaster.
Yeah,
It really
definitely. One of the first things we're going to do, because we're going to set up, like we did the community advisory committee and the technical, the first thing we're going to do is finalize the study boundary, but generally it's going to all be, you know, it's included in this work. We can do whatever we want to.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have one more question and it slipped my mind. I'll think about it. Oh, so when you mentioned the contractor yards and this zoning rewrite that we just went through, you know, one of the things that I've often said is that, and the community has said, I mean, if we can put up buffers, that's a start. But if we don't have any legal right to enforce that, then we need to figure out how we do that. And is that through an ordinance? Is that something that goes to Ms. Shanahan's committee to address? Because it's long overdue. And I think the answer that we get of, well, we can't do anything, is not enough. It's just, it just doesn't work, because I think we're at a point where we're making those improvements, and we need to be intentional about making those improvements in a way that positively impacts the neighbors around them. I'm going to beat a dead horse. I'm on it now, because, and parking is an issue. And so I hope that parking is something, because right where I live, there are 2 illegal trucks right now filled with junk, that because it's South Norwalk and because parking is the way that it is, we have too many commercial vehicles parking on our street.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the interesting things that's specific to this plan. I guess it relates to Jim and Darlene's question. You know, it's not as we typically, okay, let's look at every land, let's look at every parcel. How could we develop it to its highest and best use? That's what we're really trying to position this plan towards, is how do we address community concerns as a result of development? And is there opportunities for right size development in certain areas? How do we address a lot of these policy goals and have honest, like deep discussions with community and residents in that area to hear them out and figure out what we could do from a policy perspective. I think that's the sort of nuance that's different from some of the other plans we've worked on.
Barbara?
Yeah, I just, before I, make my comments, I just want to add to Darlene's comments about the buffers. I mean, that's hugely important. And I agree with you so much, Darlene. I mean, it has to be done. It has to be done. And, we need to find what, because, we, as we have, supported the South Norwalk School, we have talked about it's incumbent upon us to make it, the best community school and to improve the community around it. And so we have, Public Works involved, and we have, TMP involved. And so now, I want to say, like, at first I was kind of having a rough time wrapping my brain around what you were describing, Brian. But I think this is probably going to be some of the most important work that we will do and learn, because you're engaging the community, right? What are the community's needs? And again, I will commend you again, Brian, for how well you have done that. But, it's like the very beginning of how we can begin to combat those societal structures that plague our minority communities. And it's like just the very beginning. So it's just so important. So I'm really, really excited about this, and excited about, what's going to come of this study. It's, there's nothing tangible right now. So it's, I don't know what to think, but I just have so much hope, I just do. So.
Jalen?
Yes, all of this work is really great work. And I just want to kind of highlight, like Ms. Young has said, the importance and the urgency of this work. Because all of my life, I grew up in South Norwalk, and always had family in South Norwalk. For my entire life, people have been talking about how South Norwalk was always forgotten about. And I think it's important, like Ms. Young said, that now that all of these changes are happening, that the people who endured all of this forgottenness aren't left out. But I think in this work that we're doing, it's important for us to think about how urgent it is, because there's people right now who are moving out of Norwalk and South Norwalk because they can't afford to live here. There's people that we all have friends that grew up in South Norwalk that they just can't afford. They moved up 95 because it was less expensive. So though we want to do this work and we want to do it right, so I'm not saying that we have to rush, but I do think that we need to have that urgency and importance, that there are people who are moving out of Norwalk right now because of the impacts of development. So I think that is important, and I'm not saying that to take away, but I just want to put that urgency, because we are trying to prevent it, but it's already happening, and it has been happening for the past decade or so or over. So we want to just make sure that we see that and we understand that we have to make this happening. It's not just trying to prevent it. We have to just kind of slow it down and stop it.
And that is, and just to, jump on that, I agree 100%. I think that one of the reasons why I made a very specific point to bring on an economic impact firm for this is because, exactly to your point, we have to understand that fully in order to be able to help. And I think we have a sort of a low resolution understanding of that economic flow about why people are leaving. I mean, we know intuitively why, but I want to fully understand why. And I want to understand what kind of policies could actually help that, and what policies may actually make that harder. Whether it's, you invest in an area, then all of a sudden the property values go up for the landlords, and then they pass that on, or however that dynamic works is what we're going to try to model as part of this, because, there's a lot of things that affect that. The land value is obviously one of them, and the land use decisions that have been made in Norwalk, but there's a lot of things outside of our control. Just the world has not gotten cheaper across the board. So how do we kind of take a look at that? What can we do at the local level to combat that? And I don't know many communities that get that right. And I think I want us to be that community that gets that right to the best of our ability.
Darlene?
And to expand on what Jalen just mentioned, I mean, I think a lot of that is rent control, and that's a bad word, but we have to find a way to incentivize, you know, landlords who then see this development going on around them, and then they increase their rent. And so, you know, how can you increase your rent to $300-400? That's a lot for a lot of people, and then expect to be able to sustain yourself and your family. But I mean, that's something that is difficult to even try to get done. But we have to say it. We can shake our heads and say it is, but there has to be a remedy, and I think some way to work around it. And we have to have the intent and to do that. We have to have the willingness to have those conversations.
I couldn't agree more,
You can
Darlene.
incentivize some of these landlords who haven't done any improvements to their home until now. And that's obvious on Lexington Street. I mean, you see that now. And so it's a concern. It's a hard thing to grapple with, but we gotta come up with something. I'm sorry.
I couldn't agree more. All I was going to say was, and I know Jess kind of touched on this a little bit during her presentation. We have a number of housing affordability studies and housing studies coming down the pike that I believe, and Jess can tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't think I am, deal squarely with this issue. So there is more to come on in that space specifically. I'm sorry, did I just see Nora's hand go up? If so, you're on.
I wasn't trying to cut you off.
No,
and
that's
I
okay.
honestly was waiting for the rest of the committee to be finished with their questions.
I think the floor is yours. Go for it.
Are there others with questions or? Okay.
I think he said go ahead.
Oops. All right. So I just wanted to jump in briefly to thank you, Brian. This is exactly the study that I had hoped to see, and I'm really beyond thrilled about it. I did have a couple of sort of technical questions on the study, which again I think is really just phenomenal. I think it's asking exactly the right questions. I'm thrilled that it is hopefully going to get us the data we need to back up some of these policy questions, and that, you know, to Darlene's point, perhaps will give us the leverage to take to the state to argue for why we need the authority to do rent control. But I did want to ask a little bit about the intersection between the Community Advisory Committee and broader sort of community outreach. So I noticed that there are 2 meetings listed in there, but only 2 meetings. And again, that's the right amount, you know, if you're confident that Community Advisory Committee is sufficient. But I just wonder if you could talk a little bit about kind of the strategies for community inclusion that are kind of built into this study, and again, what we can do with the time and the money and the, you know, affordability and the advisors we already have. But it seemed important to make sure that you're confident this is getting us enough community input.
Yeah, and I think the way we kind of grapple with it, I don't know if you were involved with the South Norwalk train station study, but this was a sort of similar structure that we had. And what we did to kind of expand that reach is we actually opened up some of the CAC meetings to larger community conversations as well as the technical. So we have a little play in there to expand that if we do need that. Obviously, the engagement is a cost attributable to some of it, so we just wanted to keep it economical within the 150,000. I'm confident that that's going to be enough, and if it's not, we're able to kind of reposition and figure out with sort of more surgical meetings is kind of how I referred to it, and try to figure out when we do identify a community issue using the CAC to kind of expand that outreach capacity. So I'm pretty comfortable with that. I think the best benefit we could get, though, to your exact point, is understand from you all who we should be talking to and how. I want to get deep in there and talk to people directly, as many people as I can directly, even outside of the typical community engagement process. So that's going to happen as part of our staff no matter what. So that, you know, that's how our South Norwalk TOD plan was successful, is because we didn't, you know, we really made an effort to do extra engagement, and I intend to do the same thing for this project.
Terrific. And
I'm fully representative of what's going to end up happening, just because it's, you know, in the budget that we're talking about.
No, that's terrific. And I certainly, would be happy to volunteer. I will literally go knock on doors with you, because I think this is tremendously important. And again, a tremendous opportunity to get this right and to experiment and to figure out what we need. My second question, I was fascinated and thrilled to see under task 3 and the implementation strategies, that the goal here of a 1-to-1 ratio of market rate and affordable development, that would obviously be, I think, an enormous expansion of kind of where we're at. But I did wonder where that number came from, if that came out of the Community Advisory Committee, and sort of how that approaches what having that as a kind of a ratio or goal, how that's going to impact the studies that you are conducting. Is that going to be sort of an underlying factor in your market analysis? I just wondered if you could talk a little bit more about where that came from and what the impact of that might be.
Yeah, I think part of it is a holdover from the South Norwalk, the train station study, when we wanted to talk about a 1-to-1 replacement ratio for any affordable units that had been repurposed, like Leroy Downs and everything. But I think it's a goal that is just the starting point for the discussion for the rest of this plan. But I think Jess might have raised her hand. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, I want to kick it to Jess for a little context.
Yeah, I just wanted to, so I just want to provide that there was that the way in which we've talked about this work is that the item and the motion would be that we would move the $150,000 from GGP contingency over to the redevelopment agency, so that the redevelopment agency could draft the scope and finalize the scope with feedback from different community members and different folks, right? So I just want to highlight that there's no backup material for the meeting because we're not approving the scope of the study. We're actually just approving the $150,000 moving from the city to the RDA to be able to do that. And the reason, again, for no scope and no background materials being included in this particular meeting is because we need to finalize those once we talk to different folks in District B and different folks in the MLK Corridor Initiative. I know Reverend Clark was really eager and also tried to put a call out to Reverend Curtis as well in order to be able to talk a little bit more with Brian to be able to finalize the scope. So Nora, I just wanted to provide a little bit of context there because I think people might be confused about referencing of numbers and just, but wanted to give a heads up that it's not the scope specifically. It's more just the ability to transfer those funds to finalize the scope.
Thank you. No, and that is actually helpful because that was not how that was conveyed to me. So I apologize for creating confusion there. So I'll follow up then offline regarding some of the actual numbers in the draft.
Yeah, that'll be helpful. That's what we're looking for. The next steps. That's helpful. Thank you.
Fantastic. No, I'm so excited. Thank you so much to both of you and to your teams for this work. This is a just tremendous opportunity.
Okay, Jess or Brian, anything else to add before we move the item here? Nope. Any other comments from council members? If not, all in favor? I think that was everybody. So I don't need to say opposed. I think it has passed. Okay. I think that's all for our agenda tonight. I will take a motion.
Motion to adjourn. I beat you,
Lisa beat you. Lisa
no,
beat you
I
to
said it. Verbal beats a
You know what?
hand.
Lisa doesn't say anything. I'm giving it to Lisa.
Okay.
You can get it next time.
Maybe. Okay.
Motion
Lisa.
to adjourn.
All right.
First time, Darlene, this year.
I know,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
All right. Good night.